to be an entrepreneur, you have to be delusional to a certain degree.
Yes, yes.
Because you have to believe in a thing that doesn't exist yet.
It's always like the Uber of X, the Tesla of this.
Our fundamental mission is for a more connected life for people.
All right, I'm so excited to be joined by the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Civilized Cycles. Marc Liu joins us on the Business of Social podcast. Marc, what's going on, man? Thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, lots of stuff going on. Where to start?
So much to get into. Let's start with this, I guess, would be just for the listeners. Can you give a rundown of all that you oversee at Civilized Cycles on a day-to-day?
Sure. So, like you said, I'm the chief revenue officer, which means I'm mostly responsible for all things go-to-market, and that encompasses marketing, both consumer and brand marketing, but also retail and B2B marketing, because we distribute through a nationwide network of specialty bike shops. I'm also in charge of all things fundraising and all of those fun co-founder duties as well. But ultimately, it's a startup, so whatever needs to be done, I'm in there to do it.
Awesome. So I know the whole idea of Civilized Cycles really, at the end of the day, comfort e-bikes, right? That you guys really have this goal of being a company that can provide these type of bikes and this type of transportation to as many people as possible throughout the U.S. So can you talk about the vision a little bit and like where you guys want to be long term? Again, you talk about startup. Where are we looking at 5 years down the road, ideal for Civilized Cycles?
Yeah. So I'll start with the mission of Civilized Cycles, which is to provide better alternatives to people driving cars. I mean, that's really the name of the game. If you look at where this country is going in terms of people riding bikes, especially e-bikes, we saw this really sharp spike in bike and e-bike purchases during the pandemic.
Right.
And bike purchases have kind of leveled off a little bit, but e-bikes have continued to stay strong. And I think that's really a testament to people's appetite for different modes of transportation. And there are a lot of factors that went into this. Partially it's more people working from home, and then all of a sudden realizing, well, I actually don't need to get into my car to get to work and then to do all these different things. And then also realizing that it's a lot more fun and more pleasant, and it's better for your health and for the environment. And then on the other side, you have cities that have, done things during the pandemic, like blocked off certain parts of the city to allow for restaurants to come onto the streets and do stuff and limiting car traffic. And then lo and behold, people like it, and people don't want to go back to the way things were because this is better. And the businesses like it because we can get more people into the streets, more people shopping. It's better for everyone. So, we're very much in the vein of making that more attractive and more practical for people, because while there are a lot of e-bike companies that are out there, they're mostly following the same sort of model of making a great bike first, which is fantastic, and there are great brands out there, but they're making a bicycle first and then they're putting a motor onto it, and that's really kind of what you see in most places. And this model gears mostly towards athletes, leisure, children, that sort of thing. And that's not what we're about. We're trying to make e-bikes that are for people to solve regular transportation challenges. And that's how we came out with our product. And that's where we see ourselves going in the future. I mean, we currently have one product that's out in the market, the Model 1, which is a premium e-bike. But we're also looking to launch other products like a more mid-tier price one, so that we can, like you said, make this accessible to more people. We've got cargo bikes that are in development to facilitate commercial delivery, especially in dense urban areas, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's where we see our place in the overall pie.
So I read a bunch about Civilized Cycles, and people calling it the Tesla of e-bikes. I always love that. It's always like the Uber of X, the Tesla of this, but the Tesla of e-bikes. But I guess, what are your thoughts on the macro revenue side of things when you talk about like a $5,500, you own this bike for life, but also this idea of every company's looking at this subscription model or this leasing model. And I know for you guys are offering like a $290 a month, where essentially it could be more of a monthly plan, which I think when you look at the Pelotons of the world and really a lot of tech, right? I feel like the subscription model is where a lot of folks are going. So how do you guys look at the two sides of that revenue stream?
Yeah. So to start with, right now our product retails for $69.50, which is definitely on the higher end of e-bikes. We're not the most expensive, but $7,000 is a lot of money for anyone,
Yeah.
But that being said, we're looking at, again, as a substitution for cars. And so, if you compare this to equivalent products like a Vespa or a used car, or certainly a new car, then all of a sudden the economics become much more interesting. That being said, the tried and tested model for cars has always been financing, right? Like very few people buy a car cash outright.
Yeah.
And so again, tying back to our mission of making this accessible for more people, we worked really hard to find financing partners that would enable us to allow people to buy the bike for the equivalent of a monthly car payment or less. And that's really, the big driver for us offering that is accessibility. Obviously, if people want to buy it cash outright, we're very happy to do that.
Right.
But we also recognize that that's not necessarily in the realm of the possible for everyone. And also as part of that, we've got products in the pipeline that are going to be at a much lower price point too, so that we can cater to that market.
Well, as someone that uses DoorDash a lot, and sometimes I order food that's about a mile away and it takes 40 minutes somehow. I'm all about Civilized Cycle, maybe a DoorDash, this cargo idea. I like it because I think it probably gets, it probably helps the speed and delivery too in these dense areas like you talk about. So I'm excited to talk about that more, but I want to also talk about your time, and maybe we can share a laugh or a tear together in the agency world, right? Like 12 years at Elemental. Can you break down for me all that you ever saw and kind of that company that you helped lead as well before your time at Civilized?
So I was one of the co-founders of Elemental, which was and still is a digital marketing agency that largely focused on hospitality, travel, consumer, lifestyle, those sorts of things. So I helped build that from scratch from a core team of 2 people.
That's awesome.
Through to ultimately an agency of 25 people across offices in New York, Dallas, Sao Paulo, Manila. And we got to work with some really amazing clients like the UFC, Stoli, Blackstone, really crazy clients like Turtle Bay Resort, and we were the agency of record for tourism for Thailand. Nice. In North America and South America for over 6 years. So during those 13 years, I had a variety of responsibilities. Obviously, in the beginning, I was, a significant part of the team doing the day-to-day, and we started with a core set of services that included, website design, social media, some PPC, and all of the nuts and bolts of digital marketing. And then as we grew, my role progressed more towards that of building the team, mentoring, and towards the latter stage, really kind of top-level agency strategy, seeing where we were going to go as an agency in terms of service mix and industry focus, and also business development, strategic alliances. So I enjoyed all of those different things, but I think the part that I enjoyed the most was really kind of building the team and actually bringing in people who were much better at the individual disciplines than I was. That was a lot of fun.
I like the specialist over generalist once you get to a certain size of agency. I'm curious, somebody that like lived this and breathed this space with so many different brands across so many different industries. I know that you have a thought on this, but when it comes to these brands overall, when you look on social, digital, what they're doing marketing wise, what do you think most brands get wrong when it comes to addressing their consumers on a daily basis?
Yeah, I have a lot of very strong opinions about this, but I'm gonna moderate. Yeah, I'm gonna moderate what I say. I think, speaking from my own personal experience, one of the more frequent challenges that I saw was on the subject of social media, which I know you know very well.
Yeah.
And specifically in terms of, how should brands look at social media when it comes to performance and evaluation and its role in the overall marketing mix. Because when we started the agency in 2009, social media was really only just getting started as being like one of the big drivers in marketing. Forget digital marketing, like marketing in general.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you remember those days when you could buy Facebook clicks for pennies on the dollar, and you could do all sorts of funky things on Google.
I was telling this story, not to interrupt you, but when we started in 2013, we didn't have a lot of case studies or credibility. So I don't know if you're a sports fan, but Florida Gulf Coast University was called Dunk City. They were making a Cinderella tournament run. We called Florida Gulf Coast University. Can we have your passwords to Facebook and Twitter, and we'll run your social during March Madness? Like, oh yeah, here's the passwords. Go for it. So that shows you the difference 09, 2013 compared to now when you're talking about multi-million-dollar budgets across social. But I mean, that's how, little of a bullet point it was when it came to your marketing strategy.
Yeah. Although I will say there's probably more than a few brands that still share their passwords like that. So, I'm sure it's not completely dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was early days and was very exciting. And even then, people were getting very excited about social media being the place that everyone has to be. And nowadays it is, uncontroversial. Like you have to have a very strong social media presence. But a big part of the work that I used to do and I still, talk to people about is helping to educate people on how to think about social media, what it is, what it isn't, what it does, what it doesn't do, and how to evaluate your own performance. Because, it's very easy to get misled in a lot of different directions because of the abundance of data that's available. There are so many metrics that you can look at, and for the layperson from the outside looking in, it's very easy to get sold on the idea that followers are the number one thing that you should look at, or this engagement rate, or this reach, or whatever it is, all of which are important. But there is always the danger, and I've seen this happen many times, where people fall into the trap of, falling in love with the data and not necessarily, using the data to drive performance improvement.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've seen on my end. I'm sure you've seen similar cases in your work.
For me, I think, the way I look at social is really upper funnel marketing. And I think the best way you can do upper funnel marketing is provide value to your community and actually create a community, right? So where I find a lot of brands make mistakes is they're just beating their audience over the head with call to action and check out now and look at us and this brand and logo. And nobody really wants to interact with that. As you know, you and I are sitting on the couch sometimes, like, can I just be entertained for 20 minutes? Can you make me laugh? Can you educate me? And I think the brands that look at that first, like, I'm serving my consumer, I'm serving my community, and I'm going to be a place they can hang out, have fun. And then, every once in a while, I might hit them with a lower funnel tactic or do some dark posting and what have you. But I think that's where people get mixed up, is like, how much money can we make off of every Instagram post in terms of like a direct call to action, lower funnel metric? And it really is, I think, if you focus and invest on building that community, much like a Patagonia has done, then you create so many ambassadors and so many lifelong fans that will just do anything for you the second a new product comes out. So it does take an investment. Marketing is more of a long-term game, but I like the quote. It's like brand over time, sales overnight, right? You just got to, social media is about creating that brand and that feel, no different than what Nike's done over the last 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's, for me, it's always important to keep in mind at least three kind of aspects of marketing, which is, like, you've got the brand, then you've got storytelling, and then you've got performance marketing. Right. And, the three go hand in hand, and they always work better when you have all three in place. The storytelling, for me, there are metrics that you can tie to it to help guide you gently in one direction or another, but you can't worship at the altar of the metrics, because some things you just do because they're right, because they look good, because the story is well told, because that is it has intrinsic value in and of itself. And I understand that that's tough for marketing managers on the brand side, who have to report to higher ups and need to constantly demonstrate performance and that sort of thing. But I think that's also, on the agency side of things, one of the responsibilities, to kind of educate them, say, look, let's all make sure that we're on the same page as to what the ultimate goal is and what our plan is. And once we've created a plan, stick to it.
And that's
let it have the chance to succeed.
Yeah, Mark, that's the biggest thing. Because I mean, we work with Fortune 500 brands. I mean, multi-billion-dollar institutions. They don't know what the North Star is. They don't know what the ultimate goal is. And everybody's just kind of, you got 40 people just doing work every day and kind of praying and, hopefully this works. And hopefully this is what, I think this is what we want. I'm assuming this is what we want. And there's not even a playbook of 5 slides that say, this is who we are. This is who we want to be. Here's who we're talking to. And this is what success looks like. So it's pretty insane. You think that every Fortune 500 brand or every Fortune 5000 brand would have those key pillars, but it's pretty crazy how, I mean, brands that people know out there just don't even have that.
Yeah, I will say in defense of brands, I think part of the blame does lie squarely on the agency side of things, where for years some of us may have oversold the importance of metrics and the idea that everything has a straight line ROI that's
Yeah.
measurable.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot in that respect.
Yeah, and I think, marketing and PR overall, it's like it's such a need and it's so amazing when it works well, but it's difficult to put an actual ROI on every single post or every single idea, every single grassroots campaign. So, but I do think what's interesting is that as we grow and as folks like you and I kind of ascend in our careers, there's a lot less people at the top that don't understand social and don't get it. And why are we investing here? So I'm starting to see that a shift a little bit. I think you would be a great person to ask this question to because your role as a CRO. Can you help explain the difference for our listeners? I love getting people's different takes on this. The difference between sales and marketing. Because I
Sure.
know being in the CRO seat and then being on the agency side, I'm sure you have a good breakdown of what that is.
Sure. Yeah. The easiest way that I can explain it, and this is just my take, but it's also from me working alongside CROs who I respect greatly, is that the sales ultimately is about driving revenue. It's about P&L stewardship. So there is also an aspect of profitability there as well if you're doing it right, but it is about getting getting a client across the line or getting customers to purchase your product and service. And then if you're doing it well, also shepherding them through the lifetime of that product and service so that you can generate more sales,
Right.
so on and so
The
forth.
direct marketing approach. Yeah.
Exactly. And what that means is oftentimes it's more one-to-one, oftentimes it's more relationship based. Not always so, but those are easy ways to kind of delineate it from marketing. Whereas marketing has a broader mandate, or rather kind of like an anterior mandate of telling the story of your brand, your product and service, and giving people a reason to care about you, to want to learn more, and ultimately getting them progressively closer and closer to that sales point, at which moment, hopefully you can hand that off to the sales team, and then they quote unquote close. Now, this is separating it kind of very cleanly for understanding. In reality, it is a messy kind of spaghetti of feedback loops and so on and so forth, but that's how it should be. But it helps to understand it that way. And so the reason I break it down that way also is to understand when you're evaluating a marketing team's performance, understanding what it is that they are here to deliver.
Yeah.
Everything needs to feed to sales eventually, but they have a broader mandate before that happens.
Well, I get your thoughts too on, I guess digital specifically, but it's much different to sell a $19.99 t-shirt, a $7.99 subscription, and then in your guys' case is potentially a $7,000 bike, right?
Yep.
And what type of, I guess, marketing works for each of those. I think on the lower cost products, you can really just throw a ton of money at some dark posts and just really hit your target demo over the head and see what your ROI is there. But I'm curious for you guys, what you've seen be successful so far anyways, when you're talking about more of a high price item that obviously you may have to touch that customer 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times for them to actually pull the trigger, rather than them again scrolling on the couch saying, you know what, I'm going to buy a bike today. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely people out there who will buy a $7,000 bike on the website on a whim.
On a whim, yeah.
But there are fewer of those people.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's definitely a longer process, more touch points in order to get them across the line with a product like ours. And in our case specifically, much like other vehicles like cars, we're selling an experience as well. And our product is so different that we have to layer in multiple touch points to tell that story, to get people to understand what it is. So in our case in particular, we have an omni-channel approach to sales and marketing, meaning that we have our consumer marketing, our brand awareness that happens digitally and happens in all the available channels, PR, influencer, print, so on and so forth. But we also have a very important retailer strategy where we've got bikes on the floor with retailers who can then sell to their customers, offer demo rides, literally let people kick the tires.
Yeah.
And also walk people through the ins and outs of the product and why it may or may not be a fit for them. And because of the importance of that aspect of the go-to-market strategy, then our relationship as the brand with the retailers becomes even more important because they're on the front lines representing us day in and day out. And so we need to make sure that we are all part of one team. So that's really kind of like the biggest difference between a product like ours and, you know, socks that you might sell online. But fundamentally, it's all about product market fit. Are we telling a compelling story that people care about?
What would you say either your rough numbers are currently or what your goals are in terms of retail versus online sales for a product like this?
I think we'll always have a significant aspect of retail as part of our mix, just because, again, like, you know, the nature of our product, it needs to be touched, it needs to be
Well,
ridden.
and even like
And
cars, right? I mean, 99.5% of sales are at the dealership. Like a lot of people aren't just like deliver a car to me and I'll take it from there, right? Like you have to kind of
yeah, I
test
mean,
drive it.
yeah, Carvana tried that, and you know, they've had a rough journey of it.
Right.
But yeah, that's exactly the model that we're following. And you know, whether it's cars or mopeds or yachts or, you know, golf carts, the retail aspect has to be a big part of it. So, you know, for us, we look at direct to consumer as much as we like it because it has great margins, because, you know, all the benefits of it. I think we'll probably always have a roughly even split between that and retailers. Now, whether that retail is always through third parties or whether we eventually get into our own retail, that's up for debate, and that's kind of like a longer term question. But retail definitely will be a big part of it.
Well, I'm curious with that because I mean, I won't mention the brand, but we had a conversation with a golf brand, and same thing, right? When you're talking about buying an expensive bag of clubs or a driver, you kind of need to swing that thing at your local golf shop before you invest $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 on a new set of clubs. Do you look at DTC and retail as two separate marketing really campaigns? Because I mean, ultimately, you're trying to drive people to retail stores, and then eventually, hopefully, they actually check the bike out and purchase. Or DTC, you're trying to put them through this customer journey of purely digital. So, are those somewhat intertwined? Are they completely separate? Like, how do you attack those from a marketing standpoint?
They're very much intertwined for us.
Okay.
For a few different reasons. You know, one, for the reasons we already talked about in terms of test rides and that sort of thing, but also the our relationship with our customers really only just begins at the sale, because we're selling vehicles, and therefore, you know, people are paying a lot of money for these vehicles, so they expect the experience to be great throughout the lifetime of that vehicle, which means maintenance, service.
Yeah.
You know, think about a car, right? Like whenever you drive a car off the lot, you probably already know where you're going to get it serviced. It might be with the manufacturer, it might be with somebody else, but we want to make sure that we have you know, the ability to take care of that experience throughout the lifetime. And what that means is it's probably going to be through local bike shops. And so for us, when we're thinking about the marketing, it's all part of one continuum. There will be some slight tweaks here or there. So for example, like there are financing options that we offer through our website, like the, you know, the $290 a month payment that we can offer that some bike shops may not be able to offer, right? But by and large, we want to be thinking about it as one continuous experience, and letting people decide how they want to purchase it. If they want to buy it online and have it delivered to their local bike shop for assembly, great. If they want to have it delivered to their front door because they know how to put it together, great. And if they want to, you know, go into a bike shop and ride off with the bike, fantastic. It's all good for us.
I'm jumping around here for you, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
no worries.
But every time you say something, it kind of reminds me. So you mentioned financing, which made me think interest rates. I'm giving you a you know, how my brain works.
Sure.
What give me interest rates. And another thing I've been talking a lot about, Mark, and I think you can speak on this as well, is just how the economy, big money, Wall Street has changed over the last 6 to 12 months, where you look at Netflix, Facebook, Spotify, these companies that were really, the way they were judged was, are you adding net users? Are you adding net subscribers every month, every quarter? And that affected your stock price, right? And I think what's kind of the pendulum has shifted here, whether it's a Disney, whether it's Netflix, Facebook, you see with the layoffs and things like that, because the bullseye is shifted to like, no, wait, are you profitable though? Are we going to get a return on this rather than the subscriber model? So I'm really curious to get your take on that, because sitting in the CRO seat of a startup and also knowing what's been happening with big brands over the last 6 to 12 months, have you noticed that shift? And what do you think? Where do you think we go from here?
So I love that you have this question,
Yeah.
because before I started my marketing agency, I was an investment banker for many years. I am a reformed investment banker now. I no longer walk in that world. But I do take a very keen interest in the capital markets and mergers and acquisitions and that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I'll answer the question from the lens of my particular industry. So in the last couple of years, really, we've seen a lot of people invest in rideshare companies like Bird and that sort of thing. And we've seen a lot of those investors be pretty disappointed with the outcome of what's happened there.
Yeah.
And you know, a big part of that is those businesses provided physical products, but they were sold as if they were software. And therefore they got astronomical valuations, and therefore people were very disappointed when they didn't meet that.
Right.
And so we've certainly seen, you know, a little bit of a bounce back from that, where investors are looking for plain old-fashioned business models that, you know, sell a product, do it profitably, do right by their customers and provide value, and then rinse and repeat, but progressively get bigger. Now, having been an investment banker and also watched the capital markets for a very long time, I also know that that doesn't last, and that people forget the lessons of the previous crisis. And you know, we will get back to the point where people will want to invest in things that don't necessarily make any sense. But for us, at least, the way that we structure our business is our goal is to make a high quality product that provides a lot of value to our customers over a long period of time, and sell those at a profit margin that can, you know, provide money for us to invest, but also for our partners, like our retailers.
Right.
And then keep doing that until we get bigger.
Because I mean, if the metric for you to continue to evolve your value would be just get more subscribers to your bike, or just get more sales, you can lower that thing down to 1,000.
Sure.
I mean, Uber, that's what they did early on, right? They wanted to beat out Lyft. They brought all their prices down 50%, so Lyft couldn't really compete. And then once they had market share, they rose it. But it was always interesting for me as a small business owner. I know you can relate to this as a CRO of a startup. Is like, it just felt like all the advice was how to get these huge valuations based on not making money, but just based on what could happen based on the subscribers or what have you. So
well, that's still happening. Yeah. Even in our industry. So, you know, there are a few different I won't name names because, you know, I do like the product that these people put out, but a number of very large e-bike manufacturers, like in top 5, you know, I'll see announcements where they come out and say they've raised $65-100 million, and then immediately following that they say we have plans of being profitable by 2025.
Right.
And on the one hand, I understand from a financial perspective who's investing in that. On the other hand, that's not the model that I wish to subscribe to.
Right. And it worked for some of the very top stories, right? Obviously the Facebooks of the world and all that, but it's not something that works for everybody. I would love to get your thoughts. We talked a bit about this a little bit with the data metrics and what you should be looking at, but what do you think one thing, especially in 2023, and as things have been shifting so much, one thing every marketer should be asking themselves as they look at their brand?
I think for me, it really comes down to the brand fundamentals. Like, I've seen this so many times working with clients who have built a great business and then hit the ground running and never stopped running.
Yeah.
And never took the time to really examine their brand fundamentals. And by that, I mean, like, what is our core mission? You know, what is the thing that we aspire to do better than anybody else? Why do people choose us versus other people? And a lot of businesses can survive and actually thrive without going through that formal exercise. But what that ends up meaning is that as brands grow, you naturally get more stakeholders within the brands, and then they start to go off in slightly different directions. And then what
almost
happens
competing
is
against each other in a way, which is odd. Yeah.
Exactly. And then if, for the marketer, then the marketer gets pulled in different directions because, oh, we could be doing this or we could be doing that, or these people bought our product and, we should be speaking to them. And again, it's not necessarily wrong to do that, but I think at a certain point when you want to kind of make the most of the resources that you have as a marketer, it's very clarifying to take that time to really refine what your brand strategy is. And knowing
what makes
that
you
it's not
different, what you're really good at, like you said. Yeah. So true.
yeah. And it's always a work in progress. I mean, brands evolve, right? Like the top brands have changed over the years. So it's not something that you're locked into forever. But taking a beat and doing that work from time to time really does pay off. If only in marketing dollars not wasted.
For entrepreneurs, I'm sure you've read a lot of books, as have I, and they talk a lot about, working on the business, not in the business. And I think, taking that day away from the business and just looking at the financials or looking at all your leads and the success of those and what worked and what didn't. Like, I think whether it's small businesses like ours or even startups or large brand, Fortune 500 brands, I don't think that happens enough. And I love what you said there. You keep on running and never like take a breath to see, okay, what is actually working here? How can we be more efficient? I love to get your story because I ask this question a lot in the podcast is if you're starting a company from scratch or if you are a consultant for a company, where do you start if the company starts from ground zero? And you actually went through this. So I'm curious, like that whiteboard session, and maybe you have some thoughts of how you wish you would have done it differently, but what's the first thing you kind of said to kind of start from the top and work your way down of what this company will be and how it will be successful?
I have done that a few different times. And I'll first, in all candor, you make a lot of mistakes in the beginning.
Yeah.
You make a ton of mistakes. And for me, I think, a big thing that separates people who become entrepreneurs from those who don't is a lot of people have great ideas and great skill, but as soon as they start failing, they bail. And it's not wrong. Like not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, and that's not a slight on anyone who doesn't want to do it because
you have to have a few screws loose, and we're worried people.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. I was talking to the other co-founder at Civilized Cycle, Zach Shefflin, and we were discussing the idea that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be delusional to a certain degree.
Yes.
Because you have to believe in a thing that doesn't exist yet. And if it doesn't exist yet, there's no evidence that it's possible. And so you have to believe it's possible where there is no reason to believe that it's possible.
There's no facts backing that thought up yet.
And that's delusion. And so, I think it's important to figure out pretty quickly, like whether you're that kind of person or not. So, going back to your original question about like getting started, I think, most entrepreneurs have that first intuition of there's something special here. Like I have an idea. I haven't really teased out all of the details of the how or why this is a good idea, but I just feel it deep in my gut. And I think I can make a go of it. And I believe in myself enough to make a go of it. And so, if you don't have that to begin with, then, you don't really have anything. But then after that, you have to make it real. And so finding ways very quickly to test that kind of intuition,
hypothesis,
saying like, hey, I think this is real, but how do I do it in a way where like I get immediate feedback, negative and positive, that will allow me to tweak it so that I can ultimately find the thing that is actually valuable for people, or find out that it's not a great idea, and that's good too. You got to go through a lot of bad ideas to get to the good ones. So having that ability to kind of rapidly test things, I think is something that everybody should be thinking about when they're first starting any kind of venture, because without that rapid iteration, you're never going to get to good stuff, because your first idea is almost always going to be garbage.
Yeah, I like what Mark Cuban says, like every no gets me closer to a yes. You almost have to like appreciate failing so much, like, ooh, we're that much closer. We just got another learning. We can evolve like 1 degree to the left or 1 degree to the right, and we're going to be that much closer, and almost really appreciate the losing, which again takes a kind of an interesting individual to go through that.
Oh, but on that, so your other question was, what would I have done differently? I think making your own mistakes is inevitable and necessary. Right. It's really great to learn from other people's mistakes too.
Yes, amen.
And so, you can obviously read a lot of books and join organizations, that sort of thing. But I think for me, I started the agency with no agency background whatsoever. I wasn't on the brand side. I was an investment banker. I learned everything from scratch, from online resources, and I learned to code, and I learned, Facebook ads and Google ads. I think I would have had a much more productive start if I had started within the context of a larger agency, where I could see how things operated in another organization and learn from, their successes and failures. And if I got lucky, having some sort of mentor within that organization to
almost
guide
use
me
that
in
as like a
rapid ways.
master's class in a way to kind of
Yeah,
learn. Yeah,
that's why I'm a big proponent of like internships or formal training programs within large brands,
yeah.
like if you think about Unilever or
Mhm.
other companies like that are really great at brands.
Yeah.
That education is for me as good or better than any kind of like MBA that you could get.
I know we were kind of laughing before the pod about AI, and the hot take is everybody has hot takes.
Yeah,
However, I am curious. I know all of us business owners and marketers are excited about what this probably could be, at least for the very least, efficiency and making sure we can get to point A to point B in certain fashions a little bit more efficient. Much like the change from MapQuest and printing that out on your printer to the GPS on your cell phone, it was pretty damn nice to kind of have that transition.
sure,
So let me ask you from an AI standpoint, let's start business and I'll take the marketing, but anything that
sure.
excites you or I won't ask you for a major prediction, but just like excites you about the possibilities of how that can help business.
I think it's really exciting from the perspective of kind of like rapid prototyping, or rapid kind of like idea testing.
Yeah.
Because if you take something like Chat GPT, for example, in essence, it's similar to what I used to do when we would write long form content, where we had a content team, and if I was writing an article or a thought piece, I'd have the main talking points that I wanted. I'd have an intuition about how to structure everything, but I would just sit down with the writing team and be like, blah, this is my idea. Can you give this some form? And then they would put it together in a form with their voice and that sort of thing. And we'd iterate and be like, okay, let's tighten this up. No, this idea wasn't
Yeah.
exactly what I had intended. And in that mix, they would also integrate their own thoughts to improve what I had started with, right? So this was something that I was doing already with humans. Now, there's pros and cons to using AI for that as well, like in terms of the scale and that sort of thing. But ultimately, like it's only as good as its inputs. And so I think what we're seeing, and which I think is fantastic, is you're going to get people who become very proficient at structuring those descriptions and those inputs, and then using that to generate whatever it is, content, image, whatever it happens to be, and then looking at that saying, okay, this got me 30, 40, 50% of the way there. How do I keep on sharpening the sword until we come up with something fantastic? So I'm very excited about that, because that's, rather than hiring a team of 20 writers and that sort of thing, I can crunch through that in no time at all.
I mean, 4 seconds, which is scary. I think no different, right? I guess the first iteration was like people that were really good at Googling, like knowing what to ask Google the right things. And then you click on the fourth link, it sends you to a Reddit form. You control F, you find something, you start scrolling, and you start getting really good at like, how do I find proper information? How do I ask it what I want? How do I get more precise? So I love that take. A lot. I'm gonna get some rapid fire questions here towards the end of our conversation just to get your overall thoughts. But are there any brands out there, accounts, creators that you enjoy following on social media to kind of get inspiration for Civilized, or just like you just think are doing a really good job out there?
Yeah, my latest obsession is the TikTok account of Lionsgate. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah.
I think kind of going back to what we were talking about before in terms of social media and not spamming people with CTAs and stuff like that, but really giving people what they wanted when they first subscribed. And so Lionsgate, the content is essentially like it looks like a fan account.
Yeah.
It looks like, fans of these Lionsgate movies, whether it's John Wick or whatever it is, created these really cool videos. And, some are better than others, but
using their IP, right?
Yeah, like people are sticking around, and it gives people more reason to love, their product. And so I don't really do that much on TikTok, but I follow them pretty closely.
Nice. Any book, podcast, newsletter that you consume that you get value out of that you think the listeners would as well?
Yeah, this is not marketing related, but it's very, very personal to me, and I found it very helpful. Is the Andrew Huberman podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Huberman.
There's also an Andrew Huberman. I saw recently Andrew Huberman AI, where because he gives so much advice on so many different things. You can ask the tool and it'll spit out the what he gave the advice on. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I love his content because one, he's a very sharp person, and presents a lot of content on kind of human performance, whether it's on a cognitive level, on a physical level. And I I've been a lifelong martial artist. I have a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I work out every day. I still train and spar and all that sort of stuff. So
I think Huberman's got me in the sauna more. I'll tell you that much. Based on all those,
yeah, the sauna, the cold plunge, yeah. But it's also, my wife is a neuroscientist.
Oh wow.
She's a neuroscientist who specializes in children with autism.
Awesome.
And so we always at the house are talking about kind of how the brain works from a developmental perspective and that sort of thing. So yeah, I love his podcast. I also love the way that he presents it in terms of just trying to create clear, concise information for people who aren't scientists, but also not dumbing it down.
Right, I agree.
So I highly recommend for anyone.
What would you say is the undervalued attention right now on digital for marketers that they should be paying attention to?
I think everything is pretty hot right now. I think for me, honestly, like website UX UI gets a lot of, or rather oftentimes gets pushed to the end of the pile on a lot of things.
Especially
I think
mobile.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of other channels give the feeling of being active and reaching out to the customer. If you're on social media, you're putting out posts. If you're running digital ads, you've got X amount of impressions and you've got traffic coming in and so on and so forth. And the fundamentals of having like a great digital experience. I mean, obviously, I'm generalizing. There are a lot of brands that pay very close attention to it, particularly on the e-commerce side. But even for brands that aren't e-commerce driven, ultimately, where are we driving all of this traffic from to? We're getting people through to the website, the mobile site, the app.
And if that experience is clunky, that you lose so many people at that stage.
Yeah, and also, paying close attention to the extension of the brand experience there. I mean, there are certain kind of principles that you want to adhere to in terms of great user experience and so on and so forth. But it really is an extension of all of your storytelling. And I'd like to see that pop up more in my conversations with other brands versus, oh, we gotta do this every 3 years. We gotta update the website. We gotta make it compliant to the latest standards. When's it gonna be over?
Right. Not as sexy, but such an important tool for ultimate success, right? Would love to get your final thoughts on maybe something that you learned. Maybe it's through this process of the startup with Civilized Cycles, or maybe earlier in your career with Elemental, but something you learned, whether it was a quote, a book, a situation that you wish you would have learned earlier, or you at least would like to pass on to the listeners as a good piece of advice for them to kind of, as they go through their careers.
This is something that I started paying attention to, in really in the last 5 to 6 years. And something that I was aware of prior to that, but I wish I'd become much more attuned to it earlier on. And it was the value of kind of really teamwork. And I know it sounds kind of very broad, but in what we do here at Civilized Cycles, or even in agency life, we're often kind of wrapped up in our own personal development. And I just got done talking about Andrew Huberman and maximizing my endogenous testosterone or whatever it is, right? But the reality is that individually we're not very useful. And the value of the agency is the team, and not just the abilities of the individual members, but how the team collaborates and functions together, and the collective brain and capabilities which make it magical, right? Like, and I'm sure you've seen this in your work and
Yeah.
with other brands is, sometimes I would watch my team come up with things that seemed like they came from nowhere, and would, surprise and delight me. And, um, you know, those magical moments were the best times I ever had working at the agency. And it took me a long time to figure out how to foster that kind of environment, and also understanding that me by myself pushing along doesn't make that happen. It is getting the rest of the team to buy into a collective dream,
Yeah.
um, and all kind of row in the same direction, to kind of continue to mix metaphors. But that's something that, in the last few years, I spent a lot of time educating myself on how to develop strong organizations, culture, so on and so forth. I know this subject has been beat to death for a lot, but for me, it was a huge revelation once it clicked, how powerful it was. And I wish I had learned more about that, or just become more aware of how important it was earlier in my career.
Yeah, I think when you have the right people in the right seats to understand the value they're bringing and what they're responsible for without an ego, there's a lot of amazing things can happen with like those three things kind of come to play when a group of people can get in a room and really create magic, like you said. So I love that that last part. So yeah, man, is there any for the listeners out there anywhere we can follow you or keep up to date on all the fun things you're doing with Civilized, or even you personally, maybe some jiu-jitsu training, anything you got for us?
Yeah, sure. So on the business side of things, I mostly post on LinkedIn these days, so you can look
Yeah.
me up, Marc Liu, on LinkedIn. Definitely follow us on Civilized Cycles. We actually, shameless plug for us, we're actually have an equity crowdfunding round that's live now, where
Nice.
we've opened up investment into the company to individuals, so people can buy, $100 worth of Civilized Cycles. And really was a way for us to start broadening our community, because we don't talk about it much, but our fundamental mission is for a more connected life for people. If you think about it, like, if you're riding a bike to all of your main destinations during the day, then you're really integrated into your surroundings. And so community is really the driver for us. So for anyone who's interested in supporting us in this mission, for the crowdfunding that's going to be running until the end of the month. And we'd love to see as many different faces as possible. But enough of my shameless plug.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, Marc, thanks so much for all the insight and knowledge that you dropped, both as a marketer, as a business owner, startup, all that stuff. It's been great. So thanks so much for the time. Sorry for the AI question. I won't do it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Marc.
All right, cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to that conversation with Marc. Had a great time, really picking his brain on all things, startup business, culture, brainstorming, marketing, team building. Really, really interesting dude. And I think gave a lot of knowledge on not only how to operate in the startup space, how to market from DTC to retail, but also giving you some great advice on being on the agency side. And also what I loved about what he said too, is agencies like STN, we have a duty to educate brands when they don't have a North Star, or when they aren't looking at the metrics the right way. So another good reminder for myself, as well as Marc gave me some motivation, some inspiration there on the pod. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. This has been yet another edition of the Business Social Podcast, episode number 95. We'll keep on rolling here. No need to cut that out. Episode number 95. My name is David Brickley. It's all been powered by STN Digital.